transformation is story multiplied by resonance, multiplied by flow. If you want to transform anything, and let's focus on an organization, you have to create first a story of what that organization will look like after the transformation, something really clear. Then you got to make sure that the people in the organization like that story, because if they don't want it, your story can be the most beautiful story on the planet. It ain't going to happen.
Welcome to Table Stakes, where we dive deep into the conversations that matter most in customer experience. I'm Michel Stevens, course director at CXM Academy, and today I'm tackling one of the most, if not the most, frustrating realities of CX: how to get your organization with you on the journey to becoming more customer-centric. Now, here's a scenario that probably sounds painfully familiar. You launch a transformation initiative with a big bang. The kickoff is energizing. The early wins are encouraging. The momentum feels unstoppable. And 6 months later, people are reverting to old behaviors. A year later, the transformation has quietly faded into the background and just becoming another initiative that didn't quite stick. That's the big, hairy thing we're tackling today. I'm joined by Alain Thys, author of So You Want to Become Customer-Centric, and more recently, The Transformation Code. Alain has spent years understanding what separates transformations that stick from those that fade. He'll show us how to move beyond the industrial age habits that sabotage lasting change, and how to create the conditions for transformation that becomes embedded in organizational DNA. If you've ever watched a promising transformation lose momentum, or if you're tired of change initiatives that don't change a thing, then you'll be in a hell of a ride. Alain, welcome to Table Stakes.
Thank you, Michel. You just made me very nervous with all these promises you're making on my behalf, but I think we'll try our best.
Well, that's what I do. I put the pressure on the on the guests, and then you'll have to perform there.
We'll do our best.
We'll get there. Now, before we dive into the science and art of making transformation stick, tell us about your journey. What led you to focus on the sustainability of change rather than just the initiation of it?
I think the basic idea, what got me started about on the question of how do we get change to last, is actually that I've seen a lot of programs, as you were describing earlier, fall apart the moment they started. Yes, if you push hard, you get a lot of enthusiasm, but then they started falling apart, and I started finding that was a waste of life for everybody involved, because you start working on changing the direction of an organization. You believe that is the right direction, so you put all your energy into it, and whether that's me as an advisor or the people in the organization or even the customers which are cooperating in the change, you put energy in it, you put money into it, you put time into it. And, it's always nice to then see some results. However, if you then notice that after half a year or a year, everything falls apart, it kind of gets very demotivating. But at the same time, I've been in about 30 something transformations, big and small. I also saw some of these transformations fly. They just happened. They were amazing. And what I wanted to understand is how that happened. Why? Because everybody's always talking about 80 or 90% of transformations fail. And I'm like, okay, yeah, we know that story. So tell me why they work. Yeah. What is it that, what's the magic? And I wasn't really happy with a lot of the consultancy frameworks and all the stories that were out there, because they basically just told you to do more of the same. Inspire your people, be energizing, have a big, hairy goal. Okay, nice big words, but very practically, I wanted to know, so what do I do? And I couldn't find that. in, let's say, traditional business education, so to say, and the stuff I'd learned. And then by accident, I ended up in a conference in New York where there was not a business person in sight. It was all artists, theater makers, neuroscientists, technology people, people just, I mean, a weird and wonderful bunch of people. And the interesting thing was that, I mean, I kind of got invited because they hadn't had any business people. So they thought, let's have that weird guy in. um, and when I started talking to them, I actually found out that where they were talking about transformation all the time, all of them, in a way. They all did it in their own language. Yeah. So the neuroscientists, they were talking about how the brain evolved and changed. The storytellers, they were talking about how our stories as humans evolve and how that changes our personality. And everybody had their own thing. And what I started seeing was that what I was looking for in my business world might actually be living in their world. What I was finding with these transformations that to me intuitively happened, the good ones, yeah, I actually saw them use frameworks, tools, language that actually explained what happened in those amazing moments. And I didn't really understand everything they were saying because they were a lot smarter than me, especially on those topics. And I was like, I want to learn this. I want to understand, and I want to basically say, okay, what's happening intuitively with those transformations, those moments in an organization that things just start flying. I want to understand how to kind of bottle that and see if we can create some sort of a system to make it more sustainable so we don't start wasting people's lives on things that may not go anywhere anyway, and use maybe some knowledge from outside of the business world to make that happen.
Right, right. Yeah. You know, that I want to follow up on that one. Do you need to have an eclectic group to come to such an insight? I mean,
I wouldn't have gotten there if I hadn't stepped outside of my corporate bubble.
right.
Um, it's the most interesting things I learned from the weirdest people. And I say that to their face, and they say it to mine. So we're good friends. But I mean, I learned from theater makers, which made me crawl on the floor. Tarot readers, which yeah, got really interesting. But also neuroscientists, and the thing about it is that it's not really an eclectic group in the sense of what they're working towards,
Yes.
because in a way, everybody is constantly working on transformation. You are constantly working. I am constantly working because we're constantly transforming. We know how to do this. Um, the knowledge base, however, and that's where it's eclectic, is all living in silos. Yeah. So, for instance, immersive theater makers are amazing transformational event organizers within organizations. However, if I would go to a board and say, oh, let's get in some theater makers from Soho and let's do some really weird stuff, then the business world will have a fairly conservative reaction. Let's put it that way. Bottom line, they'll tell me I'm nuts. Inversely, this group of theater makers basically would also look at me and say, Alan, come on, we're not going to work for those suits, are we? However, the interesting thing is that if you compare what they're dealing with, if you look beyond the language, if you look beyond the culture, it's actually the mix of the skills that can bring a whole, let's say, transformation movement together, because transformation isn't purely logical, it's also not purely emotional, it's a mix of things. And you need to have that almost structural approach that lives in business, but combine it with that intuitive crazy approach, and effectively yeah, you can call that eclectic. It is very eclectic because if you put everybody in a room, it's kind of interesting, but it's also extremely educational.
Right. I have to ask about your transformation code framework. I mean, it says story, resonance, and flow. I don't know, is it multiplying? I'm not even sure. But
Yes.
could you give us the elevator pitch? How does this formula help us think about sustainable change?
It's actually the formula for transformation is deceptively simple, I would say, because it's very complicated to implement, but it's very simple as a concept. And basically, it says transformation is story multiplied by resonance multiplied by flow. Now, in normal language, I would say if you want to transform anything, and let's focus on an organization, you have to create first a story of what that organization will look like after the transformation, something really clear. Then you got to make sure that the people in the organization like that story. In other words, that it resonates with what they want. Because if they don't want it, your story can be the most beautiful story on the planet. It ain't gonna happen. Let's be really clear. Yeah. So basically that story needs to resonate. Now then you've got people who go like, yay, we want to go to that future that you've just described. We really want it. You've got that hell yeah moment. And then you're going to make sure that the journey there flows. Now, the flow means that the business helps them on their journey. It doesn't get in the way. It doesn't have stupid rules, but it also gives them the tools they need to get there. It gives them the freedom to get there. And the reason the code kind of works, and I started out with 700 variables and I boiled it down to these three, is that all these three elements multiply. Yeah. So if you say, I have a great story, but it doesn't resonate, your effect goes down the drain. If you've got a great story that resonates, but you've got an archaic organization with 7,000 rules that are getting in the way, it still dies. Yeah. So all the three variables have to be positive if you want to get positive transformation to happen. Otherwise, you get negative or nothing. And at the same time, it kind of like allows you then to say, as a business, where do I need to work most? Yeah, because I may have a great strategy, I may have a great story, I may think that as a leader. But if it doesn't resonate, then maybe I, as a leader, need to start thinking, okay, maybe I need to change my story a bit because I'm clearly not addressing people about what they care. Inversely, if you've got, I mean, this is what happens in a lot of transformations. I've got a great story, and we're all going to go AI or CRM or whatever. So I come up with a great strategy, and I put in place all sorts of software. But I forget to get the people on board. Things die. Inversely, I've got a great story that, I've got a poor story. We're implementing the AI, but I don't really know what to do with it. So everybody gets excited about AI. It goes in every direction, but I'm not achieving a goal. And effectively, you can play with these three variables to kind of see how well are we doing? Where do we need to turn up the dial or turn down the dial? And effectively, what's the effect? Basically, that's kind of like it's my little E is MC square of transformation, so to say.
Oh, there you go. Okay. Hey, but okay, but let's maybe start with the fundamental challenge that a lot of organizations struggle with. Most organizations can launch a transformation, but they struggle to sustain it. Now, for me, I always wonder what's the difference between transformations that stick and transformations that fade into the background.
For me, it's actually, it's always an interesting concept, a transformation that sticks. Because saying a transformation that sticks implies that you know the outcome of whatever it is that you're doing. You're basically saying upfront, this is where we're going to end up and this is what we're going to be doing, which can work for small things. But if it gets bigger, there's so many variables in organization, in life. An American president makes a move, another president makes another move. There's COVID, there's all sorts of things. So those are the big ones, but there's also lots of small things happening. So it's kind of hard to predict what the outcome is. And for me, it's actually less about sticking or not sticking. It's about a concept which I learned from a narrative designer in Australia, who basically does storytelling design. And effectively, there are two stories around transformation that can be told. And one is a compliance story, and the other one is a real transformation story. Now, when I look at most transformation programs in organizations, they're compliance stories. What do I mean by that? Is there's a small group of people who go to an expensive offsite somewhere, play with flip charts, get some expensive consultants in there, and come up with a strategy. It's a good strategy. It's very considered. I'm not knocking the work. It's probably very, very good work. And then they go to the organization and they basically say to the organization, now we're going to implement this strategy. And you have to do that. So they do a strategy cascade, as people like to say. Which means that, which is a cascade of PowerPoint presentations, workshops where you give people the feeling that they have input. You script it a little bit, you put in a few things that are deliberately wrong so that they can correct you. And at the end of the day, you throw in some KPIs and some software or whatever it is to make things happen. It's a perfect system if you want things to move fast. Yeah. It's like if you want things to move fast, you haven't got time, and it keeps you as a leader, gives you that feeling of control. Yeah. However, in that process, this whole idea of resonance, which I was talking about earlier, goes out the window, because you've never asked anybody about, do you really want this strategy? Is this strategy sensible for you? So what you're doing is you're using your power and your dominance as a leader, however soft you package it, yeah, as a way to force people to do what you want them to do. Now, any school teacher, any parent will tell you that that is a strategy that has limited limited success. Yeah. Because what happens the second you look away, what happens when the leader changes, what happens when a situation changes, everything moves back. Yeah. A beautiful example of that was COVID. Yeah. It worked. We all complied, or the vast majority of us complied. The moment the pressure was gone, how quickly did everything go back? Yeah. In organizations, it's the same. The moment a leader who may be a very inspiring person drops away, something changes. A friend of mine a long time ago, he compared these programs to like, if you've got a bathtub, and the impact that you can have with a program like that is just put your fist into the bathtub. Yeah. And if you're, or even sit in the bathtub if you've got a little bit more body, and you can see the water rise and you're like, hey, this is good. But then the moment you get out of the bathtub, that's the actual impact you had on the organization, because it just goes down again. And it might even be a bit lower because some water stuck to you. And that is where transformations don't stick, to your point. In a way, it's like, yeah, it's not really a transformation that you were going for. It's basically you want people to do what you want them to do. On the other hand, if you say, I'm going to let a change emerge, and instead of saying, I'm going to force you to do what I want you to do, I'm going to invite you into a world that is so cool and exciting, yeah, that you want it and you don't want to let go of it anymore. Yeah, that takes a little longer because the first bit, the compliance, is fast but doesn't stick. Transformation is slower, but it does stick. Then you're going to lean in. And this is like at the end of COVID as well. I mean, try and get rid of work from home now. Yeah, which was, everybody started working from home. They now want it. That transformation's happened. That boat's gone. And I think that's kind of the difference. So stick, non-stick, it's not like a pan. It's more like compliance versus invitation.
Yeah, I think I get it. Yesterday, I finished a keynote, and one of the slides was with a chicken cooked for 15 minutes on 200 degrees, and was perfectly grilled and everything. It was looked delicious. And on the other side of that slide, you saw a chicken 25 minutes on 400 degrees. You know, and you can imagine that it was a black chicken, right?
Yeah.
And I think that it relates to very much to what you're saying. I think it is not just um, about enforcing the change upon the organization, but it's actually creating the conditions for lasting change, if I understand it correctly.
Yes, absolutely. It's all about that. At the end of the day, um, transformation is not about pressure or being smart. It's about creating an environment. I mean, as humans, we're the result of our environment. Our behavior is completely driven by our current and our past environment. So as leaders, it's much more effective to actually create an environment that invites people into a certain direction rather than pushing them in that direction. And it's kind of like, yeah, it's working on curiosity and desire, or as they say in Flemish, goesting, which is it's a hard to translate word, but it's that
We should
hell yeah.
translate it, Alain. We should translate goesting into English.
Yeah, I've been looking, but it's basically that feeling like I really want this. I really want to move towards this. And if you can ignite that, then things automatically happen. If you don't, then at some point, you're going to run into pressure and things are going to start falling apart.
Yeah. I know that you are very much into Japanese culture. I have a little bit of interest into Japanese culture myself, but that comes through Lean and then Six Sigma. But you make the distinction, or you distinguish Kaizen from Kakushin. If I'm correct, how does that distinction apply to making transformation stick? When do you need revolution, and when do you need evolution? Because if I understand them correctly, that's the difference between the two, right?
Yeah, it's basically I learned the whole thing. I mean, to your point, at Toyota, which are masters in Kaizen, and then at one moment, Toyoda-san, so the president of the company, kind of felt like the business was getting complacent. It was getting too, it was getting too good at repeating itself and becoming too cold of a machine. So he decided to design a sports car himself for the hell of it. Literally, just like, we got to do something different. And that idea of breaking the mold is called Kakushin. So, in other words, it's actually the opposite of Kaizen. With Kaizen, you continuously improve what is. With Kakushin, you basically say, you know what? The hell with it all. We're going to do something completely new and that breaks every mold. And effectively, you need to do that every time, let's say, when you realize that what you are doing doesn't really make sense anymore. If you think about it, like as a business, it's we just finished a project on death care and funerals, yeah, and effectively the funeral industry has been the same for a couple of 100 years. However, if you look at what that industry is currently delivering to grieving humans, it's out of sync. Yeah, it's like, I mean, I don't even need to explain it anymore. You know what I mean?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
So by applying Kaizen to that process, you're not going to get better. Yeah, you might get the coffee a bit better, or you might get, the flowers last a bit longer, but that's not the point. Yeah. What people need is meaningful farewells, which are nature inspired, which have a whole different approach. If you really ask humans, what are you looking for? So to make that change happen, you need to do what Toyota-san did and basically just say, okay, let's break the mold and see what we need to build. And I would say, if your first part of the question, like, when do you decide which of these two, is very simple. If you're doing the right thing and you're sure you're doing the right thing, then Kaizen all the way. because you want to get better at doing the right thing. However, if you feel you're doing the wrong thing, yeah, getting better at that is not going to get you, eliminating all the little wrongs is not suddenly going to make you right. Yeah. And, better flowers, better coffee is not going to make a better funeral. So then you basically go for Kakushin and you step back and you say, now let's forget about all that. Now, relating to transformation to stick, it's actually, I think it's the Kakushin slash Kaizen concept is actually a different lens on the same topic. When you have a transformation that works, it may look very revolutionary from the outside, but inside it feels like evolution.
Right.
It's really it's kind of like, I mean, imagine you and I mean, a couple of months, about 2 months ago, we saw each other again after a number of years. Yeah, we're in a coffee shop here in the village, and both of us had transformed in a way. We looked at each other. We were still the same, but hey, you're different, and we had some differences. Now, for us, each of us, those changes, you know, were a jump in time. However, for each of us individually, ourselves, we've just evolved in that journey. And the same with organizations, in the sense of the moment you start introducing a new idea into an organization, once it starts getting hold, people start living that idea, to them it doesn't feel like revolution anymore. Yeah, it actually just flows. It's natural because I want to make a better funeral. So what do I need to do? Oh, I need to talk to the humans. I need to actually have a different conversation. And basically, these are all small steps. It's 1,000 small steps which are evolutionary. So it's in a way, again, a different way of Kaizen. But to the outside world, if I then give you the end result in one go, you go like, wow, that's completely different. So it's different lenses on the same topic.
Looking at the bigger picture, how do you build organizational capability for that sustained transformation? How do you make transformation or the transformation competency a part of the organizational DNA? How do you do that?
I think it's at the end. I mean, I've been thinking about that for a long time, and I think it all starts with the story. In the sense that it's about creating a vision, a goal for the business that is so resonant with the people, yeah, that they really want it, yeah, and this is where organizations today, and always they talk about KPIs, they talk about numbers, they talk about we want to be number one in the market or number one in NPS or whatever it is, and let's be bloody honest, nobody cares, yeah.
Mm.
The only people who care are the ones whose bonus is directly related to that number, and they don't really care about the number. They just care about their bonus. Yeah. I mean, that's how it works. And so if you don't really care about a certain goal, then all transformation towards that goal feels like pain. Yeah. It's like something you have to do. Whereas if you create a goal that really people can inspire to, yeah, and that they go like, yeah, this is what I want, that is going to create a movement within the organization where people are much more open to change. For instance, I mean, there's like I worked with a direct sales company called Oriflame a couple of years ago on their transformation, and their core promise, their core flame, they really didn't need me for that because they already had it, is to help people make their dreams come true. Yeah. So everybody they touch in the organization, everybody who becomes a distributor, they want to help them make their dreams come true, which in a very practical sense means that if you're in Indonesia or in Ghana or in Vietnam, and you haven't got any education, they want to help you achieve a teacher's salary. Yeah. So, this is where they want to get you. Now, when you talk to these people, I mean, this is real. This isn't one of those wishy-washy purposes. This is like really in the business. When you then talk to the people, they've connected that to their KPIs and their business model, and they make more money. The more people they help make their dreams come true, the more money the business makes. So it's like perfectly aligned. And if you have to talk to those people about change, I mean, when we did the transformation program, it was dead easy. We were like, oh yeah, now we need to do this. And they went like, yeah, of course, because that's going to get us to our goal. Yeah. And as humans, we're totally fine with that. Yeah. If we have a goal we really want to go for, and then basically to build that DNA, as you say, to build those capabilities, it's about having a vision that is so strong that it gets your people out of bed. And then as leaders, helping them achieve it. Just, standing back, giving them the tools, killing whatever doesn't make sense, and just watch the magic happen, which is the other part of developing the capability, because that requires a very different type of leadership than many of us, than I have been told. Yeah. I mean, I've been taught, like, as a leader, you know where you're going and you're going to get your people there. Actually, it's the other way around.
Yeah.
It's about knowing where your people want to go, connect that to the business objective, and then letting your people carry you there. It's like the Chinese say, the best leader is invisible. You don't even know he did anything or she did anything. So that's kind of like, I know it sounds a bit fluid and organic, but that's where that DNA sits.
No, but I think it makes sense that it's organic and fluid, because that is exactly how change works. It's not about, you're gonna go there. It's about people wanting to go somewhere, and you can only create the conditions to do that. But yeah, if people will take that path, is up to them.
Now, when it comes to capabilities, just to add on to what you were just saying, one thing to build in there is also the patience for change to happen. Because this whole push for compliance usually is because we want to hit whatever KPI that we dreamt up on that expensive offsite. Now, reality is transformation goes at its own speed. You can encourage it, you can give it the conditions, but it only moves when it wants to move. And typically, I've seen, because and especially the successful ones I've seen, they work on an exponential curve, which means that in the beginning, you have a feeling that nothing's changing at all. Yeah. And it goes very slow because an exponential curve is flat at the start. And then you suddenly hit that tipping point, and then it goes really fast. And effectively, one of the capabilities of the leaders to develop is the patience to nurture it. Yeah, it's like being a gardener rather than it's like the gardener who gently brings up the garden, rather than the contractor who just comes in and goes like, okay, let's get some concrete in here. It's that thing. So that's one capability I wanted to add. Sorry.
Yeah. No, perfect. Alain, we're coming to the end of our time together. I want to make sure that our listeners walk away with some immediately actionable insights. Now, for every CX leader whose transformation is starting to lose momentum, what's the very first thing they should do tomorrow to get it back on track?
I think it's literally back to the transformation code. It's asking yourself, first of all, what is the story that I'm telling to the organization, to whoever it is that I want to influence? Is it a compelling story? Is it clear? Yeah. Am I actually being clear about what we want to achieve? Because very often you're not. I mean, I'm not. I struggle with this myself all the time. The first idea is never the idea I need. Yeah. It's always number 3 or number 4. So am I clear in my story? Secondly, does that story resonate with the people I'm trying to affect? I mean, we had the situation about a year ago with a professional services firm, and there the CX lead was talking about NPS scores, ROI, all these, all the things that you learn in good programs, and they're all needed. However, the partners didn't really care about that in their heart. And then we hit on something very simple called business value at risk. And we translated everything all the customer data, we translated into business value at risk. So customers that were unhappy or customer that were satisfied but indifferent, they were at risk because they could walk away. Suddenly, partners started leaning forward and they started saying, yeah, but which accounts are those? And, we got to do something about this. Why? Because that story started resonating with something that the audience cared about. And then the final bit, and this is where also I think anyone in CX can take an even more proactive role than we usually take, is to actually then help action take place. Because very often, and this is, I mean, I've said this myself in the past as well, but I've changed my mind a bit on these things. Very often it's like, oh, and then you have to bring the people together once you have the customer insights and they have to come up with actions. Actually, I'm a step further. You have to suggest them the actions. In other words, like with those partners, we then went to those partners and basically said, now with this account, these are the 3 things we would suggest you do. And guess what? We made it flow in that case because they didn't have to think about it. Yeah. If needed, we gave them the data. Yeah. So basically taking action was easy. Yeah. It was compelling because the story resonated, and it was clear because it was a good story they cared about. And effectively, I think as a CX leader, whatever the challenge is, whether it's a journey issue, whether it's an NPS issue, or whether it's a very strategic we want to move issue, what is that story? Do the people that I talk to actually care about it in the way I tell it? Or do I need to change? And yes, that might mean you have to change your strategy just to match the people. That's the way it works. And then how can I help them take action? Not take the action for them, but give them the tools, get them out of the way, give them the praise, give them, whatever is needed to make it flow.
Fantastic. Okay, I cannot wait to read the book. I really cannot wait. So
Well,
we're
I'll
gonna
have your
put
feedback as well when you've done it.
yes. So it's on my nightstand. It's ready to go. I just needed some time. But yes, it is absolutely on the list. If anybody else wants to read it, I guess they can simply buy it somewhere. We're gonna put
It's on
the
Amazon, it's everywhere.
there you go. And we'll also put the link in the show notes so that people will make it easy for them to buy the book. Now, I don't know about the listeners, but I loved how you position a transformation not being the result of perfect planning or flawless execution, but about creating the right conditions. A story that evolves, a resonance that deepens, and flow that becomes natural. If I may conclude, I think the most successful transformation leaders aren't the ones who can create the biggest splash, but the ones who can create the longest ripples, right? But thank you, Alain, for sharing your insights. I really
Thank you for having
appreciate it.
me.
You're
Thank you.
quite welcome. And thank you for listening or watching to Table Stakes. If this conversation sparked something in you, we'd love to hear about it. Until next time, remember, transformation is about creating conditions where people choose to change themselves. Thank you.